Ethan had always known that people noticed him, but often not in the way he wished. He was smaller than most of his friends, not just in height but in presence. It was never a cruel thing, just a quiet difference that made him feel like he had to work a little harder to belong. He remembered growing up, watching bigger kids dominate the playground, taking the swings and the soccer ball with an easy confidence he didn't have. People had always told him, "You'll catch up, Ethan, you'll grow." And he did grow, but not in the ways that mattered most in those early years. He grew in patience, in understanding, and in quiet strength. On the morning of the wedding, Ethan woke up with a strange mixture of excitement and nerves. Today was the day he had dreamed of, though in ways he hadn't fully understood until recently. He went through the motions of getting ready, carefully putting on a crisp suit that had been tailored to fit him just right. As he adjusted his tie in the mirror, he studied himself, trying to calm the storm of thoughts swirling inside his head. Would he feel out of place standing at the altar? Would he be enough? He had spent so much of his life wondering if he measured up. And now, surrounded by polished shoes, soft music, and the scent of flowers, the question came back stronger than ever. Emily was waiting across the hall, radiant and calm. She had a presence that seemed to brighten any room she entered, and Ethan had always admired that about her. Their story had not been a whirlwind romance, full of grand gestures and dramatic turns. It had been something steadier, slower, the kind of love that built quietly over shared laughter, small moments of understanding and patience that stretched across years. She had a way of seeing him, not the small, overlooked version the world sometimes treated him as, but the person he had worked to become. She saw him fully, and that was both comforting and terrifying, because he wanted desperately to live up to her eyes, to the belief she had placed in him. As he walked toward the hall, Ethan noticed the familiar faces of friends and family. They were smiling, some giving small waves, others whispering congratulations to one another. He smiled back, but inside he felt a tight knot of anxiety. He had always been cautious in crowds, aware of his surroundings in a way that others weren't. But today it didn't matter. Today the crowd was secondary. The world had shrunk in his mind to a single figure at the other end of the aisle. Emily's dress glimmered softly under the gentle lights, her hands clasped together, and her eyes found his almost immediately. That moment of recognition, silent and powerful, was enough to calm a fraction of the fear he carried. They met halfway down the aisle, and their hands brushed lightly. The touch sent a warmth through Ethan that was both electric and grounding. It was a reminder that he was not alone, that this moment was theirs to share. The gentle squeeze of her fingers made him realize how much he had longed for this. Someone to understand the small, unnoticed parts of him, to hold him steady when he felt unsure. For a brief second, he imagined all the years they had spent growing closer, and it felt like a thread had connected their past, present, and future in a single, unbroken line. The officiant began speaking, a calm, measured voice filling the room with the cadence of ceremony. Ethan listened, nodding occasionally, but his attention drifted to Emily. He watched the way her eyes shimmered with anticipation, the subtle movements of her hands as she tried to relax them. He noticed the faintest trace of nerves in her smile, a tiny quiver at the corner of her lips. It struck him then that love was not about perfection. It was about facing fears together, about standing beside each other even when both hearts were racing. He realized that all the worries he had carried for years about not being enough were simply steps on a path that had led him here. And here was the only place that truly mattered. As they stood closer to the altar, Ethan's mind wandered to their early days together. He remembered the first time Emily had laughed at one of his clumsy attempts to impress her. He remembered the late-night conversations, the quiet moments when words weren't needed, and the times when she had held his hand to steady him during life's more difficult moments. Each memory felt like a brick, building the foundation of trust and love they now shared. And as he looked at her, he felt an unspoken promise form within him, to protect, to cherish, and to make space for her in a way he had never imagined before. He leaned in slightly and whispered something so soft that only Emily could hear. The words were meant not for anyone else, but for the bond they shared. They carried meaning far beyond the letters themselves, a simple assurance that they would face this day and every day after together. Emily's eyes glistened with a mixture of surprise and understanding. She smiled, and that smile told him that the whisper had reached her heart exactly as he intended. The ceremony continued around them, but Ethan felt a shift within himself. The weight of expectation, the fear of inadequacy, seemed lighter somehow. He realized that this day was not about anyone's judgment or the grandeur of the setting. It was about standing with Emily, committing to a shared life and trusting that the love they had cultivated over time was enough. He felt a sense of calm determination settle over him, a quiet strength that had been building silently for years. Each step down the aisle had felt deliberate, a rhythm that mirrored his heartbeat. He focused on breathing, on the small details, the gentle sway of Emily's dress, the soft hum of music, the distant murmur of the gathered crowd. And in each detail he found reassurance. Life had not been easy, but this was a moment of clarity. This was where he belonged, with someone who saw him fully and loved him anyway. Ethan noticed how the light caught on Emily's hair, the subtle shimmer that made her look almost ethereal. For a moment he felt as if time had slowed, stretching the minutes into something almost sacred. The world outside the hall disappeared, leaving only the quiet space they had carved together, a space that had grown through patience, laughter, and shared experiences. He realized that this was what it meant to be fully present, to inhabit a moment with the person who mattered most. As they approached the altar, he felt a surge of gratitude. Gratitude for the small choices that had brought him here, for the support of friends and family, and for Emily's unwavering faith in him. He knew that love was not a single moment but a series of choices, large and small, that built a life together. Today was one of those choices, a choice to stand beside someone who had seen him at his smallest and still believed in him. Ethan adjusted his posture slightly, trying to project confidence even as a flutter of nerves lingered in his stomach. Emily reached for his hand, and the simple act grounded him. In that touch he felt the sum of all their shared history, the laughter, the challenges, the quiet moments of support. It reminded him that love was not measured in grand gestures alone, but in consistency, care, and the willingness to meet each other halfway. As the officiant began the final words of the opening ceremony, Ethan took a deep breath. He had never felt more ready to step forward into the unknown. Life had always asked him to prove himself, to stretch beyond perceived limits. And now, with Emily by his side, he realized that those limits were only as constraining as he allowed them to be. Together they had built a space where both could grow, a space where smallness no longer felt like a weakness but a foundation for strength. The music continued softly in the hall, but Ethan felt it fade into the background. All his focus was on Emily, standing across from him at the altar. She looked radiant, her eyes shining with a mixture of anticipation, love, and the faintest trace of nerves. For a moment everything else disappeared, the crowd, the flowers, even the soft sunlight streaming through the windows. It was as if the world had condensed into a small space just for the two of them. Ethan realized that this was not just the most important moment of their wedding, but one of the most important moments of his life. As the officiant spoke, he noticed Emily's subtle gestures, the way she adjusted her posture, the small movements of her hands. Every little detail seemed magnified in his mind. He remembered all the years that had led to this moment, all the quiet conversations late at night, the shared laughter over simple meals, and the way she had always looked at him with understanding in her eyes. In those moments he had felt a connection that went beyond words, beyond appearances or achievements. And now, standing at the altar, he felt it even more strongly. He leaned slightly closer, just enough that his lips could brush her ear. His voice was low and steady, carrying a promise meant only for her. "You're too small, but I'll make it fit." The words were simple, but the meaning behind them was profound. It was not about his size, her size, or any physical limitation. It was about space, the space they would create for each other in life, in love, and in their shared dreams. It was about making room for imperfections, for differences, for the parts of themselves that the world might not always accept. Emily's eyes widened slightly, a spark of realization passing through them. She understood immediately that these words were a promise, a pledge to accommodate, cherish, and protect the space they would share. Tears welled up in her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition and relief, a quiet acknowledgement that they were ready to face life together. She reached for his hand, feeling the warmth and reassurance of his touch. It was more than comfort. It was a signal that he was fully present, fully committed, and fully aware of the life they were about to begin. In that touch, she felt the weight of every challenge they had faced and every joyful moment they had shared. all condensed into one single profound connection. The officiant continued with the ceremony, but Ethan felt a subtle shift in the air. The moment had changed. It was no longer just a formal exchange of vows. It had become a sacred acknowledgement of mutual understanding. He could see the way Emily relaxed slightly, the tension in her shoulders easing as she leaned a little closer toward him. He knew she felt the same reassurance he did, that together, they could face whatever challenges awaited them, and that their love was enough to sustain them. Ethan thought back to the early days of their relationship, the times when he had doubted himself, when he had wondered if he could ever truly measure up to her expectations. He remembered the quiet encouragement she had given him, the way she had celebrated his small victories and the patience she had shown when he faltered. Every moment had built a foundation for this day. Every shared laugh and every comforting word had prepared them to stand together here, at the threshold of a lifetime. He realized then that the altar was more than a physical structure. It was a symbol of commitment, of the space they were willing to create for each other in the world. The words he had whispered, though quiet, were a promise that transcended the room, the ceremony, and even time itself. They were a vow to hold space for each other's dreams, fears, and imperfections. In that simple act, Ethan felt a profound sense of clarity and purpose, as if the years of preparation and patience had converged into a single, defining moment. Emily squeezed his hand gently, and he felt the strength of her trust. It was not blind faith, but the kind of trust built over years of shared experiences and mutual respect. He realized that love, in its truest form, was not about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was about presence, understanding, and the willingness to meet each other's needs with patience and care. He felt a sense of responsibility, not as a burden, but as an honor, a chance to honor the love that had grown between them and to nurture it into something enduring. The officiant's words continued to fill the hall, describing the responsibilities of marriage, the importance of trust, and the value of mutual support. Ethan absorbed each word, but his mind remained tethered to Emily. He noticed the way she held her gaze on him, the subtle glimmer of anticipation and affection in her eyes. He realized that this was the culmination of every moment that had led them here, every choice that had brought them closer together, and every challenge they had overcome as individuals and as partners. As he stood there, he felt a mixture of humility and pride. He was humbled by the depth of their connection, the vulnerability they had shared, and the trust they had placed in each other. He was proud of the man he had become, not because of accomplishments or recognition, but because he had learned to love fully, to accommodate differences, and to embrace the responsibility of holding space for someone else's heart. In that quiet moment, he understood that love was not a passive feeling but an active commitment, one that required attention, care, and courage every single day. The ceremony moved forward, and Ethan found himself focusing on each small gesture, each shared glance, and each whispered word. He could feel the collective support of family and friends, but their presence was secondary to the intimate connection he shared with Emily. Every vow they exchanged carried more weight than the words themselves. It was the intention behind them, the conscious decision to stand together, that made them meaningful. He felt a sense of alignment, as if every choice he had made in life had been leading to this moment of clarity and union. Emily's hand remained in his, and he felt the gentle pressure as a reminder of their bond. He knew that this was not the end of their journey, but the beginning of a new chapter, one that would require patience, understanding, and unwavering support. The whisper he had shared, though simple, encapsulated the essence of their commitment. It was a private acknowledgement of the space they would make for each other, the adjustments they would embrace, and the love that would guide them through all circumstances. For a brief moment, Ethan allowed himself to fully absorb the beauty of the ceremony, the significance of the vows, and the profound nature of the connection they shared. It was not about the applause of the crowd or the beauty of the setting. It was about the intimacy of understanding, the depth of commitment, and the readiness to face life together. He felt a sense of peace settle over him, a quiet assurance that the love they had nurtured was more than enough to sustain them in the days, months, and years ahead. As the officiant prepared to guide them through the final words of the ceremony, Ethan felt a surge of confidence. The whispered promise he had given Emily was a turning point, a small but powerful act that strengthened their bond. It reminded him that love was not measured by size, achievement, or outward appearances, but by the willingness to create space, offer support, and nurture each other's growth. He realized that this commitment was both a privilege and a responsibility, one that he embraced with an open heart and unwavering determination. Emily's eyes met his again, and he saw the same understanding mirrored back at him. They were no longer two individuals standing on the threshold of marriage. They were partners, ready to face life as a unified team. The room seemed to fade around them, leaving only the warmth of their connection and the promise of the journey ahead. Ethan knew that the words he had whispered would linger in their hearts long after the ceremony ended. A quiet reminder of the space they had created for each other, and the love that would sustain them through every challenge. The music swelled gently as the ceremony reached its conclusion, and Ethan felt a sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. Every choice, every shared moment, and every act of patience had led to this day. He understood that love was not a single moment, but a continuous series of commitments, small and large, that shaped the life they would build together. With Emily's hand in his, he was ready to embrace all that lay ahead, confident in the strength of their connection and the depth of their shared understanding. The ceremony continued, but Ethan felt as if time had slowed just for them. He watched Emily closely, noticing the slight curve of her smile and the way her eyes reflected a mixture of excitement and trust. Each word of the officiant seemed to echo in his mind, but the meaning behind them was amplified by the connection he shared with her. Every vow, every phrase, every promise felt more significant because it was directed not at a crowd, but at the person who mattered most in his life. He realized that the altar was not just a place for formal words. It was a stage for understanding, patience, and mutual respect. Standing there, he felt a deep responsibility to honor the trust that Emily had placed in him. She had chosen him, fully aware of his perceived smallness and his quiet doubts, and in that choice she had offered him the greatest gift he had ever received, belief in his worth. That belief, Ethan knew, was more powerful than any external validation he had ever sought. It had the capacity to transform him, and standing at the altar, he felt that transformation beginning. Emily squeezed his hand gently, and he felt the warmth and reassurance of her touch spreading through him. It was a small gesture, but it carried immense significance. It reminded him that love was not always loud or dramatic. It was often in the quiet actions, the unspoken understandings, and the steady presence of someone who truly cared. He thought back to all the times she had stood by him, supported him, and encouraged him to grow. Every smile, every word, every act of kindness had led to this moment, and he understood now that their shared history had built the foundation for the life they were about to begin. The officiant's voice guided them through the exchange of vows, and Ethan focused on the words he would speak, knowing they had to reflect not only his love but his commitment to creating space for her in his life. When it was his turn, he spoke clearly, letting the sincerity of his feelings carry each phrase. He promised to support her dreams, to listen with patience, and to nurture the bond they had cultivated over time. But he also promised something less spoken, something deeper, to make room for her in every aspect of his life, to adjust and grow alongside her, and to honor the unique space she occupied in his heart. Emily's turn came next, and Ethan watched intently as she spoke. Her voice was steady, yet filled with emotion, carrying with it the years of shared experiences and the quiet understanding they had built together. She promised to support him, to believe in him, and to stand beside him through all the moments of joy and challenge that life would bring. And as he listened, Ethan felt a profound sense of unity, as if their hearts were now beating in tandem, aligned in purpose and intention. After the vows, the officiant guided them through the exchange of rings. Ethan held the small, simple band in his hand, feeling its weight as a symbol of commitment. As he slid it onto Emily's finger, he felt a surge of emotion, gratitude, love, and a quiet pride. It was a reminder that love was not just an abstract feeling, but a tangible, active choice, represented by the circle of metal that would never end. When Emily placed the ring on his finger, he felt the same weight, the same promise, and he realized that they were now truly bound together, not by words alone, but by the mutual understanding and trust that had grown between them over time. The officiant's final words of blessing echoed softly in the hall, and Ethan felt a deep sense of peace. The ceremony had not been about grandeur or spectacle. It had been about presence, attention, and the deliberate choice to hold space for one another. He looked at Emily and saw in her eyes the same recognition of what this day truly meant. They had faced the world as individuals, each carrying their own doubts and insecurities, but now they were facing it together, stronger than ever, and with a shared commitment that transcended words. Ethan thought about the whispered promise he had made earlier, the one that had seemed so small at the moment, but now carried immense weight. "You're too small, but I'll make it fit." It had been more than a reassurance. It had been a pledge to create space for her, to grow with her and to honor the bond they shared. He realized that this promise would not end with the ceremony. It would guide their daily lives, shape their interactions, and remind them of the responsibility and privilege of loving someone fully. The music swelled softly as the ceremony concluded, and Ethan and Emily turned to face their friends and family. There were smiles, applause, and well wishes, but for Ethan, the world beyond the altar seemed distant. He focused entirely on Emily, noticing the way she held herself with grace and confidence, the subtle lift of her chin, and the warmth in her eyes. Each glance between them was a reaffirmation of the promise they had made to each other, and Ethan felt a surge of determination to honor that promise every single day. As they walked down the aisle together, hand in hand, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Life had not always been easy, and he had faced moments of doubt, insecurity, and fear. But those experiences had shaped him, teaching him patience, resilience, and the importance of presence. He understood now that love was not about perfection or meeting external expectations. It was about creating a shared space where both partners could grow, feel valued, and be fully themselves. Emily's hand remained firmly in his, a steady anchor in the midst of the excitement and emotion of the moment. Ethan felt a profound sense of connection, a quiet assurance that they were prepared for the challenges and joys that lay ahead. He thought about the life they would build together, the small everyday moments of companionship, the shared laughter, and the quiet support during difficult times. Each of these moments would be an opportunity to honor the promises made at the altar, to nurture their bond, and to strengthen the love that had brought them together. The crowd around them cheered and clapped, but Ethan remained focused on Emily. He noticed the way her eyes sparkled in the soft light, reflecting the depth of understanding and affection they shared. He realized that the true celebration was not in the applause, flowers, or decorations, but in the private acknowledgement of commitment, trust, and love that existed between them. This recognition, quiet and intimate, was far more significant than any external display. As they exited the ceremony hall and stepped into the bright sunlight, Ethan felt a mixture of relief and exhilaration. The formal part of the day was complete, but the journey of marriage, the real work, joy, and shared life was just beginning. He looked at Emily and felt a surge of gratitude for her presence, her trust, and her unwavering belief in him. He understood that love was an ongoing practice, a series of choices and actions that would define the quality of their life together. Walking side by side, Ethan and Emily felt the connection between them deepen. They exchanged small smiles and whispered reassurances, reinforcing the private promises that had been made at the altar. Each gesture, no matter how simple, was a reaffirmation of their commitment to hold space for one another, to grow together, and to nurture the love that had blossomed over years of shared experiences. Ethan reflected on the significance of his whispered words, the ones that had transformed the moment into something profoundly personal. "You're too small, but I'll make it fit." They were words that transcended size, appearance, or external perception. They were about creating room for love, understanding, and mutual growth. He realized that the meaning of those words would continue to unfold throughout their marriage, guiding their interactions, shaping their shared life, and reminding them of the responsibility and privilege of caring deeply for another person. As they walked toward the reception, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that marriage would require effort, patience, and dedication, but he also knew that the foundation they had built together was strong. The whispered promise, the exchanged vows, and the shared understanding at the altar had created a framework for their life together, one grounded in respect, trust, and the willingness to make space for one another in every sense of the word. The day continued with laughter, congratulations, and joyful moments shared with family and friends. Yet for Ethan and Emily, the most important part was the quiet, unspoken bond that had been reinforced at the altar. They knew that love was not measured by ceremony, applause, or grand gestures, but by the consistent, daily choice to support, understand, and cherish each other. This understanding, deep and abiding, was the true essence of their union. As the afternoon sun began to lower, casting a warm glow over the reception, Ethan felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had faced life with insecurities and doubts, yet here he was, standing beside the person who had seen him fully and loved him anyway. He realized that this was the culmination of patience, persistence, and unwavering commitment. The whispered promise, simple yet powerful, had set the tone for a life of shared growth, understanding, and joy. Ethan squeezed Emily's hand one last time before they joined their family for photographs. In that brief touch, he felt the enduring strength of their connection and the promise of the life they were beginning together. He understood that every challenge they would face, every joy they would celebrate, and every ordinary moment in between would be shaped by the willingness to hold space for each other's hearts. And in that understanding, he felt a deep, abiding sense of peace. After the ceremony, Ethan and Emily stepped out of the hall into the bright sunlight. The warmth of the day seemed to mirror the joy in their hearts. The guests clapped and cheered, showering them with flowers. But for Ethan and Emily, the world felt quieter, softer, as if the celebrations around them were a gentle backdrop to their own private moment. Hand in hand, they walked slowly, taking in the significance of what they had just done. The day had been a culmination of years of trust, understanding, and love, and now it was a beginning, a doorway into a life they would build together. Ethan glanced at Emily and felt a surge of gratitude. She had been his anchor, his guide, and his partner through many of life's challenges. Her eyes shone with a mixture of joy and reassurance, and he knew she felt the same sense of quiet triumph that he did. They had stood at the altar, exchanged vows and made promises, but the true meaning of the day was not in the words spoken. It was in the understanding that they had created between them, the commitment to nurture each other's hearts, and the unspoken vow to face life together with patience and care. As they made their way toward the reception, Ethan reflected on the path that had brought them here. Their love had not been instant or effortless. It had grown slowly, nurtured by small acts of kindness, laughter shared over quiet dinners, and late-night conversations about hopes and fears. They had faced challenges that tested their patience and commitment, but each difficulty had strengthened the bond between them. And now, standing beside Emily, Ethan felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He realized that love was not only about feeling happiness together. It was also about supporting each other through life's trials, understanding each other's needs, and making space for one another to grow. The reception hall was beautifully decorated with flowers, candles, and soft lighting that created an atmosphere of warmth and intimacy. Friends and family gathered around, offering congratulations, hugs, and kind words. Ethan and Emily smiled and nodded, expressing their gratitude, but their attention often returned to one another. Each glance, each touch, was a reminder of the promises made at the altar. It was a silent acknowledgement that while the celebration was joyful, the real work and beauty of their relationship lay in the life they would create together beyond this day. Ethan could feel the weight of responsibility in a comforting way. He understood that love was an ongoing practice, one that required attention, care, and constant effort. It was not something that ended with the ceremony, nor was it something that could be sustained by words alone. Every action, every choice, and every thoughtful gesture would be a continuation of the vows they had exchanged. He felt a quiet determination to honor these promises, to be a partner who was attentive, supportive, and willing to adjust for the sake of their shared happiness. Emily squeezed his hand gently, and Ethan felt the reassurance in that simple act. Her touch was a reminder that they were partners, united not only by affection, but by shared understanding. She had seen him in his most vulnerable moments and had accepted him fully, just as he had come to accept her entirely. That acceptance, mutual and unwavering, was the foundation of their relationship. And as they walked together through the reception, Ethan felt the deep comfort that came from knowing they were about to embark on a life built on trust, patience, and love. The couple took their seats at the head table, and the room buzzed with conversation and laughter. Ethan and Emily exchanged quiet smiles, sharing a private understanding that no one else could fully comprehend. They had both changed over the years, grown in ways that were often unnoticed by the outside world. But the journey had brought them closer, and their love had deepened. This day was a reflection of that journey, a celebration of the bond they had cultivated and the life they were prepared to create together. As the reception continued, Ethan found himself thinking about the small, everyday moments that would define their life together. He imagined mornings spent sharing coffee, evenings walking together after work, and quiet nights where words were not needed to express love and understanding. These moments, simple and ordinary, were the ones that would truly test and strengthen their commitment. They were the moments where patience, attention, and empathy would be required, and Ethan felt ready to embrace them fully. Emily, noticing his thoughtful expression, leaned closer and whispered a small comment about the music playing in the background. Her voice was soft, warm, and familiar, and it brought a smile to Ethan's face. He realized then that love was not only about grand gestures or dramatic expressions. It was about these small, shared moments of connection. Every smile, every touch, every word spoken in quiet understanding was part of the tapestry of their life together. The couple moved through the reception, greeting friends and family, accepting congratulations and sharing laughter. Ethan could feel the joy of those around them, but he also felt a deep, private sense of satisfaction in the knowledge that he and Emily had created a space for each other's hearts. They had stood at the altar, exchanged vows, and made a commitment to nurture each other's well-being, and now that commitment extended into every interaction, every gesture, and every shared experience. As the evening progressed, Ethan and Emily found a quiet moment alone on a balcony overlooking the garden. The sky was painted with the warm colors of sunset, casting a golden glow over everything. Ethan took a deep breath and looked at Emily, noticing the way the light highlighted her features, the gentle curve of her smile, and the warmth in her eyes. It was a perfect moment of reflection, a pause in the midst of celebration that allowed them to connect deeply once again. "I can't believe this day is real," Emily said softly, her voice filled with awe. "It feels like we've been waiting forever, and yet it feels like it happened in a blink." Ethan smiled, feeling the truth of her words. "It's real because we made it real," he replied. "Every choice, every small step, every moment of understanding brought us here. And now, we get to continue building this life together, one day at a time." They stood in silence for a moment, simply holding hands and absorbing the beauty of the evening. Ethan felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this point. Every challenge, every moment of doubt, every shared laugh and tear had led them to a place of deep connection and understanding. And now, standing beside Emily, he felt a sense of readiness to face whatever the future held. The couple returned to the reception, joining their family and friends for dinner and dancing. The room was filled with laughter, music, and the joyful energy of celebration. But Ethan's attention remained largely on Emily. He noticed the way she moved, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke to someone, and the subtle ways she expressed affection and care. Each observation deepened his appreciation for her, reminding him of the depth of their connection and the importance of the promises they had made. As the evening continued, Ethan reflected on the whispered words he had shared at the altar. "You're too small, but I'll make it fit." At the time, it had felt like a simple reassurance, a private acknowledgement of their shared space and understanding. But now he realized that those words carried a deeper significance. They were a promise not only to accommodate each other's differences, but also to actively create a life together where both could thrive. They were a commitment to patience, empathy, and continuous effort, a pledge that would shape every day of their marriage. Emily, noticing his reflective expression, leaned closer and whispered a small comment about the flowers on their table. Her voice, gentle and warm, reminded him of the ongoing dialogue of care and understanding that would define their relationship. Every shared word, every gesture of attention, reinforced the foundation they had built together. Ethan realized that love was not static. It was a dynamic, living practice that required constant nurturing and intention. And he felt fully prepared, to engage in that practice for the rest of their lives. As the night drew on, the couple found themselves surrounded by family and friends, dancing, laughing, and sharing in the joy of the day. Yet even in the midst of celebration, Ethan and Emily maintained a quiet, intimate connection, a private understanding that transcended the external festivities. They had created a space for each other's hearts, and that space would continue to grow, expand, and strengthen as they moved forward together. Ethan felt a deep sense of contentment as he held Emily close. The whispered words at the altar, the exchanged vows, and the shared moments of the day had solidified their commitment. They were partners not only in celebration but in life, ready to face challenges, cherish joys, and build a future together. Every small gesture, every act of attention and care would be a continuation of the promises made on this day, shaping the life they would share for years to come. The night had grown quiet, and the last of the guests had left the reception hall. Ethan and Emily lingered behind, savoring the calm that had replaced the excitement of the day. The room was softly lit, candles flickering, and the gentle hum of music from earlier still seemed to linger in the air. For a moment they stood together, hand in hand, feeling the quiet strength of their connection. It was a rare time when the world felt theirs alone, a pause that allowed them to reflect on the journey that had led them here and the life they were about to begin. Ethan looked at Emily, noticing the way her eyes glimmered in the candlelight. He saw the mix of happiness, relief, and trust that had been present throughout the day, but now it was deeper, richer. He realized that this day was more than a celebration. It was the start of a new chapter in a story they had been writing together for years. Every small decision, every shared smile, and every moment of understanding had led them to this quiet, profound point. And now, standing here, they were free to step fully into the life they had imagined together. Emily squeezed his hand gently, and Ethan felt a surge of warmth. It was in that simple gesture that he recognized the power of their bond, the unspoken understanding, the commitment to care for one another, and the willingness to create a life together filled with respect and love. He thought back to the whispered words he had shared at the altar, the ones that had carried so much meaning in that brief moment. "You're too small, but I'll make it fit." Those words had been a promise, a quiet pledge that had set the tone for their life together. Now he understood how deeply they would guide every day of their marriage. They moved to a small balcony overlooking the garden, where the night sky stretched endlessly above them. Stars twinkled faintly, and a soft breeze carried the scent of flowers. It was a perfect moment of reflection, a chance to pause before stepping fully into the responsibilities and joys of their shared life. Ethan looked at Emily and realized that love was not about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was about these quiet moments of connection, the shared understanding, and the deliberate choices to support, nurture, and grow together. "I can't believe it's finally over," Emily said softly, her voice filled with awe. "Everything feels so perfect yet so real." Ethan smiled, feeling the truth in her words. "It's real because we made it real," he replied. "All those moments before this, every choice we made, every act of patience and care, they brought us here. And now we get to continue building this life together." Emily leaned into him, resting her head lightly against his shoulder. Ethan wrapped his arm around her, feeling the comfort and warmth of her presence. In that simple embrace, he felt the culmination of their shared journey and the promise of all the days ahead. They had learned to trust one another, to hold space for each other's hearts, and to face life together with patience and understanding. And now, as they stood quietly beneath the stars, they felt ready to embrace every challenge and every joy that the future held. Ethan reflected on all the small, ordinary moments that had brought them here. The laughter over late-night dinners, the quiet conversations about dreams and fears, the gentle encouragement during moments of doubt. Each of these had been a building block for their relationship. He realized that love was not only about extraordinary experiences, but about consistently showing up for each other, making space for each other's needs, and nurturing the bond they shared. Every day of their marriage would be an opportunity to practice this kind of love, and he felt ready to embrace it fully. Emily, noticing his thoughtful expression, smiled softly. "You've been quiet," she said. "What are you thinking?" Ethan chuckled gently. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am," he said. Not just today, but every day that led us here. Every moment we shared, every challenge we faced, it all brought us to this point. And now I feel ready for everything that comes next. Emily's eyes glimmered with emotion, and she reached for his hand again. I feel the same way, she replied. We've grown so much together, and I know there's so much more ahead for us. But I also know that as long as we stay connected like this, we can handle anything. They stood in silence for a few moments, simply enjoying the presence of one another. The night was calm, and the world beyond the balcony seemed distant and unimportant. All that mattered was the bond they shared, the love they had nurtured, and the life they were about to build together. In that quiet space, Ethan felt a profound sense of peace. He realized that marriage was not an ending but a continuation, a daily commitment to grow together, to support one another, and to hold space for each other's hearts. As they returned to their suite for the evening, Ethan and Emily reflected on the lessons they had learned throughout their relationship. They had discovered that love was about patience, understanding, and empathy. It was about listening, adjusting, and making room for each other's dreams and fears. It was about recognizing that neither of them was perfect, and that the strength of their bond lay in their willingness to accept each other fully. Every whispered word, every shared smile, and every quiet gesture had strengthened their connection and prepared them for the life ahead. The first night as a married couple was peaceful and full of quiet joy. They talked about their hopes for the future, the adventures they wanted to share, and the ways they would support each other in the years to come. Ethan realized that these conversations were just as important as the vows they had exchanged. They were the daily reaffirmation of the promises made at the altar, the commitment to make space for each other, to nurture each other's hearts, and to face life together with courage and patience. In the days and weeks that followed, Ethan and Emily settled into their new life together. They experienced the ordinary joys of shared routines, the small victories of working together on daily tasks, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing they had each other's support. Every morning, every shared meal, and every conversation became a reminder of the love and trust they had cultivated. Ethan often thought back to the whispered words at the altar and the significance they had carried. They were not just words. They were a guiding principle, a reminder to create space for each other, to adjust when needed, and to prioritize the connection they had built. Emily, too, reflected on those moments. She realized that love was not only about grand gestures or public declarations. It was about the ongoing practice of care, attention, and understanding. It was about creating a life where both partners could thrive, feel valued, and grow together. Every choice they made, every moment of attention, and every act of kindness reinforced the foundation of their relationship. And as they navigated the challenges and joys of married life, they discovered that the strength of their bond lay not in perfection, but in the deliberate effort to hold space for each other's hearts. Over time, Ethan and Emily faced challenges like any couple. There were moments of disagreement, moments of fatigue, and moments when life seemed overwhelming. But each challenge became an opportunity to practice the lessons they had learned: patience, understanding, and the commitment to make space for one another. They learned that love was not about avoiding difficulties, but about facing them together, holding each other steady, and finding solutions as a team. And in each of these moments, the whispered words at the altar, "You're too small, but I'll make it fit," served as a guiding reminder of the importance of creating space for each other's needs and dreams. Years passed, and Ethan and Emily built a life full of shared experiences, laughter, and quiet joy. They celebrated milestones, supported each other through challenges, and continued to grow both individually and as a couple. Their love deepened with each passing year, rooted in the understanding that true connection required effort, attention, and the willingness to embrace one another fully. The foundation they had built on their wedding day, with the whispered promise and exchanged vows, became the guiding principle of their life together. Ethan often thought about the journey that had led them to this life. From the early days of quiet understanding to the profound moment at the altar, every step had been meaningful. He realized that love was not a single moment or a dramatic gesture, but a continuous practice of attention, care, and mutual growth. And as he looked at Emily, he knew that they had created something rare and precious, a partnership built on trust, respect, and the shared commitment to make space for one another in every sense of the word. In quiet moments, They would often reminisce about that day, the whispered words, and the profound understanding that had been forged at the altar. They smiled, knowing that those moments had set the tone for a lifetime of love and partnership. They understood that their connection was not dependent on perfection or circumstance, but on the deliberate effort to nurture and support one another. And in that understanding, they found a deep and abiding joy that carried them through every day. Ethan and Emily's life together became a testament to the power of love, patience, and understanding. They discovered that true connection required more than words. It required presence, attention, and the willingness to hold space for one another's hearts. The whispered promise at the altar had not been a fleeting moment. It had been a guiding principle, shaping every choice, every gesture, and every shared experience.